Yeah, so what we're going to do is I give you guys each a tray, and so you can take the goldenrod and put it on your end and you can squish it. I've given you tea bags, and so what you're going to do is you're going to choose your plants, and then when you choose them, you can, mostly it's about a teaspoon, half a teaspoon to a tablespoon per cup. So if you squish them up, and I gave everyone a bowl because it gets messy.
What is this one?
That's mint.
Yes.
So because the medicine is in every part of the mint, you can actually take it and just do it the same as we did, and just bring it down. And we can put back to the earth what we're not using. And yes, the mint's still good when it flowers. It just means that the medicine and the energy is in the flowers. So we just pulled back down like this, then we're not going to have sticks sticking out of our trays. Horsetail, at this stage, we talked about having 2 stages. High in silica. This is a tea that you're only going to drink maybe for 1 or 2 months and then give it a break, because the silica crystallizes, and so if you drink too much of it, it can be a little bit harsh on our kidneys. But if you've got arthritis, if you've got sore joints, if you've got hair thinning, or you've got brittle bone, you want to drink the horse tail, because that's going to strengthen your bones and your teeth and your hair. These guys are totally edible. They're full of electrolytes when they're fresh. You just got to make sure that wherever you get them because that the ground is clear, because their roots can go down like 150 feet. So if you're taken from a polluted area, then it's gonna have a lot of pollution from it. And so that's why horses tell you have to be mindful where you get it from. But yeah, you'll just break off these little shafts there, and then you can eat the whole plant. It's actually quite tasty. Raspberry is the woman. I call it's the woman plant, woman herb. So it helps out with our wonderful hormones. And but it's also good for yeah. So for any of you ladies that are menopausing, this is your best friend. Or if you got a teenage girl, take lots. And so, but it's also good for your digestion. It's good to balance out your system. There are those plants that are good for the nerves. I call them nervines, and there are those good for the hormones. So raspberry leaves have a natural estrogen. Oops. The fireweed. If you are on blood pressure pills, or if you're on blood thinners, they say that the fireweed kind of works like grapefruit, that it can enhance your medication. So we need to be mindful of that. You're looking about half a teaspoon to a tablespoon per cup. So you're probably looking at a half a teaspoon. Now the mint, you might go with 1 tablespoon for all your plants, and maybe half with just the mint, because the mint is so strong, it'll take over all the flavor of your plants. But this you could probably use 2 or 3 times at this size. And people think, okay, who's got allergies here? So,
I'm good.
did you know that the goldenrod is actually an antihistamine? It actually is good for hay fever. So people think, oh, it's fuzzy, it's gonna be. So it went fuzzy here because of the heat, but I don't use heat. This is how I dry it. I tie it up in my, downstairs in my plant room, and then I have a fan blowing all the time on my plants. And so you can see the difference when it's put in heat compared to what it is when it's just hanging. Yeah. Oh, okay. So I'll get a little fluffy one here. I buy a nice fluffy one. So the fluff won't hurt you, but if you have a sensitivity to the Asteraceae family. So this has been in a dryer, and this has been hung. So usually I will hang the fireweed and the goldenrod. These were dried in a paper bag, the flowers, but if you look at it when it's on the heater, so the richer the color, the more the antioxidants, which is what helps with our cells, which fights cancer. So our cells are constantly replenishing each other, are dying off, and then they're being renewed and remade. And so cancer is when one of those cells that are supposed to die off and be taken to the dump don't, and they go rogue. And so, but plants that are deep in the colors, like the clover and the fireweed, are the ones that are going to go after those free radicals, and they're going to take them down. Chickweed is like a multivitamin. It's kind of like your spinach. There's absolutely every mineral that you need in your body, your calcium, your magnesium, your iron. Right now, what is in full bloom is our Solomon seal, the false Solomon seal. If you guys want to have a look, this is false Solomon seal. It's in the lily family. It's really sweet, and many people don't know that they can actually eat this. So what I do, because the pectin is so high in this fruit, that you don't have to add anything to it. And you look on the picture right here, this is what it looks like when it's ready to be harvested. And you just cut off the front part. And so what I did was I brought some berries here, but they have a great big giant pit in them. So they're not enjoyable to chew because it's just kind of like a pomegranate, right? You know, you got that great big. So I make leathers out of it. So today I brought some leathers because there's a lot of false Solomon seal right here on your land, and it's not quite ready. Some areas I picked this last year, so I'm gonna give you guys, this is my little fruit roll-up. I do this with the cranberries as well, but I put maybe a tablespoon in a great big tray of sugar, but this one there's no sugar added, just a little bit of water, and I bring it to a soft boil, and then I strain it because the pits, there is a couple little pits in there. And so if you'd like to try. And for those who need a little bit of lung support, Fertility Everlasting. It even looks like the little air sacs that are in our lungs. This can be drank as tea or put in a pipe. I like to put in a little bit of mint and smoke it. So if you're trying to quit smoking, or in the First Nations people used to smoke a lot of kinnikinnick, and it would irritate them, and then they would smoke this afterwards. Pearly Everlasting. Yeah. And actually, if you look at the signature doctrine, it looks like little air sacs. You just drink it in a tea, or some nations would just put it like in a clay pot in the fire and let it smoke, and then they would just breathe it in like a smudge. Keep this in the hole, don't break it up. Yeah.
Is that enough for one or two?
That's enough for two. Yeah. Because we're looking at a half a teaspoon to a tablespoon per plant. So you don't need a whole lot. Now, I didn't see anyone taking any strawberries because they call this runners for a reason. Because when you have the runs, this stops the runs, but it's also high in the bright red. So it's high in antioxidants.
So you cut up the runners?
Yeah, you can break the runners up, but it's just good for your stomach, good for your system, but it does stop diarrhea. You can do the leaves of huckleberries. Just because there's no berries, but there's lots of leaves, when they turn red, they're just as high in antioxidants as the actual huckleberry.
So what we have here is Devil's Club, plantain, and dandelion leaves. So what we did yesterday, we went out and we harvested the plantain and the dandelion leaves, and the Devil's Club is from the spring because you can only process it in the spring or in the fall. So what you do is if you have 1 cup of plants, then you would put 2 cups of oil. You could use olive oil, grapeseed oil, or coconut oil. What we have is olive oil in here, and you put it, so some people like to put it in a jar and leave it for 4 weeks. That's the slow process method. Or this one is the fast processing. So we put the slow cooker on low for about 12 to 24 hours, and then you cool it off, and we will drain it into here to make salve out of it, and that will be used for pain or for skin conditions.
Then you strain it?
And then we're gonna strain it into the pot here. So then what you can do is, with your gloves, is take this, like the cheesecloth out and squeeze it, as much of it out as you can. Looks like it's all drained out, so we can just put the whole bag there if you want. And then inside of here, we have about a cup of the oil. So now what we would do is take it over to the stove, and you would put the double boiler, so with the water underneath, put this on top, and we have beeswax that we use to thicken it up. So we'd thicken it up with beeswax, and some people put vitamin E oil in there, if that's like to preserve it, but because we have the plantain leaves, it's a natural preservative, so we don't need to put any of the vitamin E oil. And some people store it in the fridge, like once it's done, or you could store it out on the counter, depending how much beeswax you have in there. And then you rub it wherever you have pain or skin problems.
Or psoriasis, eczema?
Yeah, I think it would work for that too.
So see, this has spruce tip, thistle, I think, fireweed,
Excellent.
yeah, and there should be yarrow in here, I think. So you put it in crock pot with the oil overnight, leave it on low heat. If you can get a crock pot that has the keep warm function, it works really good, because low heat sometimes on the newer ones are too hot. And you take some cheesecloth just to help make sure you strain it really good. So I'd say it's pretty close to 5 cups. I usually use the crock pot again to mix in, so I'll just clean out so none of the residual plant matter is in there. Strained out now, we'll take it out and plug it in again, keep temperature up, and then we measure the beeswax, melt it in, and then start putting in the bottles. So we have organic beeswax here, you can see nice yellow color, and we melt it into the oil, and then the smaller it is, the easier it is to melt in, the quicker it is, so grate it down. You want to use around 4 tablespoons per cup. So, and it all depends, it's not an exact science, it's the consistency and thickness that you like. You don't want it too runny, but you don't want it so thick. And if you use a little bit too much beeswax, then you'll have that oily, waxy feeling on your skin afterwards. So again, here we have beeswax grated down. We have about 5 cups of oil, so we'll need at least 20 tablespoons of wax. And you just melt it in. So when you're doing this, you can add other essential oils, but if you're doing that, you want to add it right at the end, because you don't want it too hot, because the essential oils will kind of evaporate out at too high of a temperature, and then you don't get the medicinal properties of them. So if you're using essential oils that you buy, you make sure you put them in at a lower temperature. So probably right around when the wax is starting to harden again, just at the last second. If you look at the wax in there now, the temperature is just coming up, and you can see it's just starting to reach the wax melting point. These are starting to let loose a little bit and stretch out. So you don't want to add too much wax all at once because it'll take the temperature down, it'll take longer. So you add it slowly, and then once this melts, I'll add a little bit more and a little bit more. Once it hits the temperature, it's fairly quick, but so here we have the beeswax is melted in now. So it's a nice oil, and you want to know if you have enough beeswax, if it's right consistency. So you just scoop a little bit out, let it cool, and I test it just to make sure it's not too hot. I can put it on my skin. Put a little dab there. And so you can see it's starting to get thick, but it's not quite thick enough to hold itself. So we'll be adding a little bit more of the beeswax. I tested it here because as you can feel is room temperature easier, body temperature. Make sure it's cool enough. And it was the same temperature as my body there. So I think that's about as thick it's gonna get. So we'll need more wax. You can see it's still fairly oily. Yeah, that was still, I can see how.
Almost.
Yeah. It should work, and as it cools down, it'll get a little bit thicker too, so. And when you're finished, you just take it, rub it in. So I think it is ready for jarring. You can see it's nice white, clear, stiffer consistency underneath now. Yeah, if you use too much, then like if you feel I rubbed it in there, you don't have the waxy feel. But if you do use too much wax, you'll get that residual waxy, oily feel on top. And, yeah, you just